All right, GAC, it is March 16th here. Hopefully you can see this. Caroline can put the old American cowboy hat on for you here while I pop in and pop out real fast. Clearly we cannot spend as much time with this as we could in class. We're all trying to figure out how to do this online learning. And for those of you haters out there who don't think I put enough detail into this, if I was in my regular classroom with my students actually in it, this would be a whole lot more detail, but we're going to give you a quick overview of the importance of the Battle of Guadalcanal. So if you don't like that, or if you're not interested in this, just shut it off now and go troll and make your horrible comments to somebody who cares. Because I am not one of them. This is for people who want to know and for my students in a high school classroom called Great American Conflicts. So where we stopped, guys, was the end of the Battle of Midway. And the end of the Battle of Midway is dramatic. Along with Stalingrad and D-Day, this is one of the most decisive, brutally tough-fought battles of World War II. And it's decisive in its impact. Now, the United States, during the Battle for Midway, is going to lose 301 soldiers and 147 planes. It's not like, oh, well, that's not very much. Every loss is difficult. But the Japanese are going to lose much more. They're going to lose 4 state-of-the-art aircraft carriers, plus 3,500 of the best naval sailors, pilots, bombardiers, navigators, and crewmen that they have. It's a loss the Japanese can never make up for, plus 400 planes. They don't have the raw materials or the population to rebuild at this point. So by June of 1942, it's going to be a long and a bloody war in Japan, and they're going to tenaciously hold on to what they've got, but Midway robs them of their offensive capability. They can no longer throw a devastating and attack punch. They've just got to cover up. This is what Grant was doing to Lee, after the Battle of the Wilderness. He cannot attack. All he can do is resist. So World War II in the Pacific is going to take years. But it's now just a matter of time. And this allows for the United States, President Roosevelt, to make the decision to go out and help out England, who's had the knife at its throat since 1940. Win victory in Europe, then we can bring everything we can to bear on Japan, because there it's just a matter of time. But the first ground battle is worth mentioning. And this is a great hallmark for the United States Marine Corps, who are going to be sent in. Joe Basilone, Robert Leckie, guys like that you may be familiar with from the miniseries The Pacific. The Marines are the first one up, and at this time, they get ratty, nasty equipment. Cast iron, water-cooled machine guns that were used in World War I, things that are not fit for jungle combat in the South Pacific. They're going to get old bolt-action rifles, some of them. So they're going to get the worst of the worst. They're going to be pitted in one of the most dreadful battles of the Pacific, and they're going to find a way to adapt and overcome. And that is significant because Guadalcanal pits metal on metal. It's American Marine versus Japanese Marine. And these Japanese Marines are veteran, all right? They fought in places like China and in Singapore. This is the best at what they got. And this battle, as we'll see in the Pacific throughout, is supposed to only last a couple days. In reality, it lasts 6 months and claims 30,000 lives. And after Pearl Harbor, everyone thinks that the Japanese just stopped. Well, over in Asia, they went on their blitzkrieg December 8th, 9th, and 10th. And they keep going until all that's left pretty much is Australia. And we need to keep a shipping lane open between our ally Australia and Pearl Harbor. Sitting right smack dab in the middle of that shipping lane is the island of Guadalcanal, a small but thickly dense jungle-covered island where the Japanese planes can take off and bomb trading ships and transport ships. This would effectively cut off or kink off flow of aid into and out of the island nation / continent of Australia. So the American Marines are going to land here. They're going to go north across the island to the Tenarue River and the Manukau Peninsula and a small tributary known as Alligator Creek. Right in here, island of Tulagi, all right, like Florida. Think of like your Jeff Probst Survivor Islands. And this here is going to be called Iron Bottom Sounds. We're going to go from south to north and fight off what goes on up here. Now, fighting in a jungle is a different environment. You've got city kids from Chicago and New York and guys from farms in Iowa and Nebraska and the swamps of Louisiana, to the mountains of Appalachia and the Rocky Mountains. So learning how to survive in a jungle is difficult, especially in an area that's very wet. How do you, as a human being, handle being constantly damp? When I taught in Korea during the monsoon season, you were never dry. You got to figure out how to deal with that, especially in the military, to keep your weapon clean and in working order. And then what plants and animals are dangerous to you and what ones that you can survive on if you need to do it. Jungle training is intense. Well, the Marines were going to be taken to the island of New Zealand where they were going to undergo several weeks of jungle training, about 6 weeks, to learn how to survive in the jungle. As they get there and they march into the jungle to get ready, they're told to stop, turn around, and head back to the boats. Instead of 6 weeks, they get 6 days. And they're ordered back onto a troop ship, and on August 7th, they are anchored off the coast of Guadalcanal. And the Navy begins to shell. They fire the big 16-inch guns, the 5-inch guns, and planes strafe it and bomb it. And they're like, man, nothing could be left alive on that island. So 11,000 Marines, get off their landing craft and their Amtraks, and they jump out and they rush up the beach, and there's nothing there. And they're like, what? What is this? We thought the Japanese were going to be repelling borders, and so they get a little bit cocky. It's uncontested. The Japanese soldiers on Guadalcanal were mostly engineers and construction workers. Many of them flee, rearward till they get reinforcements. But as we start marching through the dense jungle and seeing that there can be a sniper or an enemy behind every tree and shadow, we realize that the Japanese don't surrender. Each time we surround them and ask them to surrender, they make us kill them. And so that begins to change the psyche early on here in the Battle of the Pacific. Why don't these guys quit? Well, to the Japanese, the best thing you could do was be killed for your emperor. So this is not the way things normally go. And the Japanese soldiers have been told in their propaganda that Americans are small, they are afraid of the dark, and they don't like hand-to-hand combat. Well, your Marines are kind of your roughest and your toughest bunch of guys. Many of them are wrestlers, boxers, fighters. It's kind of what they do. Many of them are country guys, so they like to hunt and fish. So being afraid of the dark and being afraid of hand-to-hand combat, if you know any Marines, is two things that really does not bother them. The other thing is the Japanese told the Americans were small, pure blood, impure blood mutts, mudblood if you're in the Harry Potter world. Now the Americans were also, to be a Marine, people were told that Marines had to kill and eat their parents, or that they were all criminals. So they were drawn with slitty eyes and like vampire fangs and horns coming out of their helmets. The American propaganda was the Japanese soldier was weak, it was like a small child, and if you would just slap it, it would fall over. Well, both sets of Marines are about to find out that nothing could be further from the truth. So as we march northward, a couple things shock guys. One is the Japanese don't surrender. Two, a couple of American scouts were captured. They were tied to a tree and they were skinned. And that starts to wake people up as to what war in the Pacific is going to be like. And then we get to the Henderson Airfield. And we capture it very quickly, and we rename it Henderson Field after the first pilot that was killed at Midway. And we begin to spread out along this northern shore, and the Japanese are going to rush in the 38th Imperial Royal Marine Division. These are some of the roughest and the toughest and the very best Marines that the Japanese have. So we're going to get metal on metal. Little by little by little, the Japanese are going to build up and try and recapture this island. At this point, they've got control of the air and of the sea. The Japanese thought that this was just an American reconnaissance. They did not know it was an en masse landing. But they are going to respond. And the Japanese planes come over, they begin to bomb Guadalcanal. And the very first night, as our Navy is sitting in the Sound, Japanese destroyers with English-speaking radio operators come in, they sneak into the middle of the American naval fleet and they open up. And the Marines like, woo, yeah, give them one. And guys like, well, how do you know we're winning? Well, we're Americans. Of course we're going to kick their tail. And then in the morning they wake up and they find out that the American Navy is gone. The Japanese snuck in, sunk so many ships they nicknamed it Iron Bottom Sound, and the Marines are abandoned. They are gone. They are on their own. The only supplies they have are the only supplies they are going to get. Food, water, medicine, ammunition, toilet paper, things causing a mess right now. Whatever they have, they're going to have to find a way to adapt and overcome. So the Marine engineers and Marines go to finishing the airfield using captured Japanese tractors, bulldozers, and pieces of heavy equipment. Meanwhile, Marines are sitting on shore, and night after night they see Japanese troop ships and transports coming in, letting off reinforcements. We're like, well, what the heck are we going to do? Should we fight them? Should we open up? No, their Navy is right there. We're on our own. What is going to happen? And so you get, and I'll show you some pictures later, guys learning how to overcome the heat of the jungle, the humidity. Back in those days, like when I was in high school, if you were dehydrated, your coach would give you a salt pill, which only dehydrates you faster. Here is a look at the airfield. Here's part of the runway. It's got shell craters in it, so we have to fix those and get this airfield ready for supplies. But how can planes land when the Japanese are crawling all over the place? So the Marines set up a perimeter along Alligator Creek on the Tanakau Peninsula. And the Japanese Marines are going to start coming from the northwest, and they're going to begin sweeping towards the airfield. On the edge of the airfield is the American Marines along Alligator Creek. And here are Alligator River, probably because it was full of alligators. Conditions begin to set in: the heat, the humidity, the dehydration. Marines are running out of food. Malaria sets in. Some genius said that a buddy told, it's called scuttlebutt, a buddy of mine whose friend is in D Company, whose brother is a doctor, said that if you take these malaria pills, they'll cause sterility and you won't be able to have children. Marine's like, hell with this. I ain't going to be sterile. I ain't taking no damn malaria medicine. I'm a Marine. I can fight off malaria. Well, now all of a sudden they're malaria-ridden. And American Marines have to live off their 100-pound bags of captured Japanese rice, where you started getting a cup a day, and then it was a half a cup, and then it was a quarter, and if there were like maggots in it, you were told to leave the maggots in it because that was a little bit of extra protein. So guys are starving. Guys were getting to lose weight. Then we get up to the Temeru River and its little tributary of Alligator Creek. The Japanese were told they were invincible. Bullets would not touch them. The Americans are weak. They wouldn't fight in the dark, and they were easy to beat anyhow. And that since we're spiritually weak, if the Japanese attack them, known as a banzai charge, they just rush at you, the idea is to send more men than we could actually shoot. Well, the battle begins, and it's along Alligator Creek where the history is written, and we have two heroes are going to pop up. One is going to be Robert Leckie, who's going to write this famous book called A Helmet for My Pillow. And the reports are we have these old, very heavy, ancient 30-pound cast iron machine guns, and they're set up along this river where there's a tiny little spit of beach at low tide. And at night, the Japanese attack. And the Marines, with their old World War I machine guns, just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and reloading throughout the night. And the Japanese just kept attacking, banzai, banzai. And the next morning, down on the beach, we count 777 dead Japanese soldiers. They just kept coming. We know 900 attacked, 777 of them are killed. And the Japanese learned, like these Americans about these Americans being afraid to fight at night. The Japanese learned that that's not true. We learned that these Japanese soldiers aren't little kids that you could smack once and fall over. These are tough, determined combatants. And so leading the Marines is a guy named Marine General Kawaguchi. And this is what he knows he has to do. He has to take back the airfield. So he's going to focus on attacking the perimeter. And so we put up a defense around the perimeter of the airfield, praying that the Navy and some planes are going to come back. And while we're not afraid to fight, we're beginning to run short on supplies. Japanese have got more men. All right, but the Japanese are not going to get resupplied. Remember, when you're given a job, you're given all the men and everything you're going to need to fit that timetable on the spreadsheet. And if you can't, that's too bad. So Kawaguchi is getting desperate. So he's going to try to attack the island for the next several months, slowly but surely pushing the American perimeter back. And near the end in October, they begin what I call raptor attacks. If you remember Jurassic Park, the very first one, where the mom in the cage at the beginning has the babies hitting the sides looking for weakness, and one of the workers falls in and gets eaten. And it takes a lot of discipline. As a Marine, you're taught that you're part of an integrated team. You're part of like UVA basketball. And if everybody does their job, all right, we're going to be fine. We have to work together. But here, you've got to have that utmost trust and confidence in your men. So I'm giving them a machine gun, and my job is to control from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. All right? Over here, all right, Ryan is going to have to get from 12 to 3. And over here, Yael is going to have to get 3 to 6. And then Felix is going to have to get from 6 to 3. And so what the Japanese were doing was attacking the perimeter at different points. And if any one of them broke through, it would open up the floodgates. So if I'm a Marine over here, and I hear Yael screaming and shouting and shooting, my tendency, my instinct is to turn around and help him. But I couldn't, because as soon as I turn my back, Japanese come out of the woods here. So this is a testament to Marine skill and Marine discipline. They hold their positions and they fight off these raptor attacks. And still the battle continues. Some guys are pretty much them and a buddy in a foxhole with a machine gun. And the Americans are running out of ammunition, and the problem is our machine gun belts at the time were made of cotton or cloth. So in the heat and the humidity and the wetness, that would swell up, and as you were shooting your machine gun, it would get jammed. The Marines have absolutely just poor equipment. The new air-cooled Browning 30 caliber is online. Army men are getting issued M1s, And Marines are fighting with crap that their dads did in World War I. So finally, falling back in a horseshoe around Henderson Airfield is the climax of the battle. And you were told, only shoot what you can see, conserve your ammo, don't worry about anybody else, they are going to hold. And this battle becomes known as the Battle of Bloody Nose Ridge. And in it, Marine hero, John Basilone will run out with a machine gun, and there were so many Japanese bodies that were piled up. He runs out and pushes them over, giving his machine guns a better field of fire. You were also issued like a giant stainless steel oven mitt that went from your fingertips to about your bicep, because you had to pick up this 30-pound water-cooled machine gun. You would burn your arm. Imagine picking up a teen pot that's steaming, smoking, and putting it on your arm. Well, in the midst of this, even his buddies were shocked. He picks one up, Basilone does, cradles it in his arm, and just kind of swivels back and forth like he's a hose sprinkler, shooting, badly burning, getting third-degree burns on his left arm. Both of these things combined will allow John, to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. I was replaying the scene from the Pacific in my head there. I'm sorry. So anyway, 700 Marines are going to hold off 4,000 Japanese Marines. And the Japanese get desperate with their banzai charges here and there, and then another one. And slowly but surely the Marines are pushed back to within 1,000 yards of Henderson Airfield. And the fighting turns vicious. It turns hand to hand. It's fists, it's clubs, it's bayonets, it's sticks. And the Marines find out on both sides that neither one was afraid to fight hand to hand. But as the Americans were losing a lot of weight, they found out that they were several inches taller and 20 to 40 pounds heavier than their Japanese counterparts. They were bigger and they were a little bit physically stronger. The other thing was when we encountered a bunch of Japanese snipers, we would bring in anti-aircraft guns, and when the artillery, we would just simply blow up the trees. It reminds me of that scene in the original Predator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and those guys, they just shoot up the forest. Well, if you're hiding in the forest, if we blow up the trees, there will be no snipers in the trees. By the end of October, the Japanese are going to call off their attacks, and lo and behold, the Navy shows back up, and the Marines will be relieved by the United States Army. The 1st Marine Division landed there in August, and they will stay all the way through almost to November on their own. On Guadalcanal, unfortunately, the Marines are going to leave behind 2,000 dead of their own, but they will also eliminate 23,000 of the Japanese soldiers, the best soldiers that the guys have had. And coming to see this was a reporter named Richard Tregascus, and he's shocked at what he sees. And everyone back home was aware of this on the radio. Tregascus will leave in the middle of the battle. He will fly home, and he kept a diary. And he gets in to see President Roosevelt, who will not censor and allow a movie to be made called the Guadalcanal Diaries. The idea was, if we let people know what's going on, they're going to panic. And Tregascus says no. If you show them the sacrifice, it will help increase war bonds. And so all of a sudden, everybody knows who the 1st Marine Division is. It becomes a book and later a movie. And because of the fighting, especially along Alligator Creek, where guys had to listen for, the alligators, crocodiles eating the dead bodies at night, we learn to be careful. Medics, here's a picture of the beach. A medic would go up, a corpsman, and you'd see a wounded Japanese soldier and you'd go to help them and they'd have a grenade underneath their armpit, or they would stab you. Anything they could do to make you shoot them. So the Marines have to learn this psychological, terrible thing known as kill it twice. If you see a dead Japanese soldier, and if you're not sure he's dead, you have to bayonet him or shoot him. You've got to kill him twice to make sure he isn't booby-trapped and going to let off a landmine or a surprise attack on you, making it much more difficult to fight in the Pacific. And so as a result of all of this, we realize we cannot spend this much time and this many lives fighting all the way to the archipelago of Japan. So the island hopping strategy, okay, we've conquered this. We're not going to go 400, 500, 600 miles in front, and the Japanese soldiers on the islands in between, that's just too bad for you. You're cut off. We can't fight you for every foot of ground. The very last Japanese soldier is found alive on an island, surrenders in 1974. So island hopping worked. Apparently the Japanese just forgot about this guy, but he's a story for a different day. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow on St. Patrick's Day.